Hello and welcome to another episode of Acting Prime Minister with me, Paul Brand, the podcast where we pick the PM and ask a different guest each week to imagine themselves behind that Downing Street door. And this week's guest isn't currently aiming for the top job, but to be deputy. Her meteoric rise within the Labour Party is particularly extraordinary when stars like hers don't often burn brightly. She left school at 16, pregnant and without any real qualifications, having had to look after her own mum from the age of 10. She's been a care worker, a union rep, then an MP, before joining the shadow cabinet and defying those who claim she's not educated enough to be shadow education secretary. Now she's by far the frontrunner to be deputy leader of the Labour Party. Angela Rayner, welcome to Acting Prime Minister.
Hello, I feel really old after that intro.
Well, that's the extraordinary thing about you, is you're not very old, and yet you've lived the most extraordinary life already.
You didn't even say I'm a grandma yet. Oh, I've seen out 4 education secretaries in my time as well.
Grandma at 37, right?
Yeah, grandma. I was trending on budget day ahead of the Chancellor. Everyone was interested with it, but I was like really proud. It was really good fun. And my son said, "Of course, Mum, it was your fault." He was like in his 20s, and I'd obviously had him when I was 16, so it was mathematically probably going to happen.
Okay, you started the trend.
I started the trend, yeah, I did.
But thanks so much for having us in your constituency here in Ashton under Lyne, and we're going to do a bit of a tour with you today. We're going to lots of different events, which should be really interesting. How is the campaign going for you at the moment with Deputy Leader?
Well, it's a bit strange, to be honest, because it's the first time ever in my life I've ever been considered the front runner for a job. I've always been the underdog in everything that I've done, so that's kind of felt a little strange. And then going about telling people why I think I'm the best person, again, feels quite strange for me, because I've always felt not good enough. I've always felt I've had to prove myself to be in a room. So I've just been bashing it out there like I always do, being a tornado up and down the country, telling people how amazing I think the Labour Party is and how we can't be downhearted and get out there and, you know, pick ourselves up because our communities deserve better than what's currently in government. So you can't wallow about it, you've got to do something about it, and that's what I'm doing.
And when you're so far ahead, it does beg the question, you know, why didn't you go for the leadership? Some people would have loved you to have gone for the leadership.
I know, but I'm John Prescott Mark II. I'm just bombastic, and I think I've grown so much. I've been in Parliament for 5 years. I've already had a meteoric rise, and for someone like me who didn't have a formal education, and as a woman from Manchester with a Mancunian accent, I've got hurdles that other people in politics don't have, and I have to earn the respect in the room rather than be walking like, say, Boris Johnson, who thinks he owns the room. I have to go in there and try and convince people why I should be in the room. And that was one of the reasons, first of all, is I wanted to show people that a woman like me can lead the country and can look at economics and can do the things that we can do just as well as any posh bloke from Eton. But I've also been an organiser all my life at the grassroots. I don't want to be in a stuffy Westminster. I don't want to be in Hogwarts, as I call it, in Parliament. I want to be out there in our communities, supporting them, energising them, and making sure that we win the next general election. And as Deputy Leader, I can do all of those things. So,
do you think I know you're only going for deputy at the moment, and obviously you're going to say that's your focus for now, but do you think that could be a stepping stone to leader one day? Is that what you're sort of going for here, kind of, you know, one step at a time sort of thing?
I mean, for me, it's about how can I best get Labour into power and how can I best serve my communities? And for me, the confidence that I've got in my organising abilities, I can do that now. I wouldn't like to never say never, because I think that would be doing a disservice for women like me, who I want them to think they can do whatever they want to do. But we also have to recognise the challenges that women from my background face. You know, it's not Walt Disney. Real life isn't Walt Disney. You know, things get in the way of that. And for me, it's about making sure that I'm in the best place to take our party forward. And if I can inspire a young girl from a council estate who was told they wasn't good enough to go forward now, and many girls who I speak to have become councillors and active in their community, said, "I've done it because of you, Ange, because you've shown me that we can do it." That's what I want to do. That's my ultimate aim, is to get people active and energised and feel confident about that. So I won't ever put myself down, but I think incrementally you've got to pace yourself and look after yourself, as well as being, you know, self-aware of what your best skills are for the country.
Okay, that does sound like a very sensible approach to life. Right, we're holding you up. We've got to get to the next location.
Yes.
Let's talk a bit more about your background there, because I know it's a cause that's very close to your heart.
It's children's service, yeah, which I opened a few years ago in the constituency. It's an amazing place.
Okay, well, we'll see you there.
Okay, thank you.
So we're here at the Leap Children and Family Centre, and this is the kind of facility that I guess helped you when you were a young mum.
Yeah, it's a huge facility because the area around here is really deprived, so a lot of people here are really struggling, whether that's emotional poverty or economic poverty. There's a lot of issues in the community here, including mental health and learning deprivation. So the Leap Centre here is for all ages, so we have family contact where people can see their children if they've got a court order and things like that. Children here can come to the nursery and get really good integrated skills so that they're, you know, communicating and working with each other, and that, you know, we've seen our greenscape and the work that they're doing, working with people with learning difficulties, getting them back into work, a social enterprise company here. So it's a real hub of things that happen, and it's speaking to some of the adult learners upstairs, they were saying that, you know, they didn't do well at school and they couldn't learn in a classroom setting, it was just too much for them. So coming here and learning one-to-one how to read, it's just totally unlocked their world for them. And something that we take for granted, like reading our own letters that come through the post. One gentleman there was saying that it was only when he reached the age of 50 and he came here and learned to read that he was actually able to read his own letters. So he had that privacy, that intimacy, that confidence and that independence to do that.
Because your mum couldn't read all right.
My mum still can't read all right, and my mum couldn't, and I've always been the main carer for my mum. So it's a real disadvantage. I've seen how that affected her. I said we had shaving foam with jelly once because she looked at the picture and she didn't know that it wasn't cream. She thought it was whipped cream and it was shaving foam. That happened quite frequently in our house because my mum was a little bit embarrassed by it. We'd all joke about it and have a bit of a laugh, but when we were younger, I mean, my children now were beyond my mum at the age of 4 and 5. They read to my mum and they read to my mum.
Okay.
So, you know, that relationship that my mum has with her great-grandchildren is different to what it was with, you know, how most people have their relationship with their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. My mum is the person that the children look after her because they read to her and tell grandma what to do rather than the other way around. So it's that lack of empowerment that people feel when they haven't got those basic skills, and it unlocks people's potential in a way that unless you've had that deprivation, you just don't realise how debilitating it is day to day.
And we mentioned before that you did have a child as well when you were 16, so you're very young to have a baby. Did you feel a stigma around that?
Massively. I mean, I felt really embarrassed about the situation because people just thought it was because it was easy. You know, it was because I ended up in a situation where I thought love was a different thing because I was searching for that affection that I didn't have. I was emotionally not nurtured as a child, and my mum wasn't. And I think that's why my mum ended up in the situation that she was in. And it's that cycle was perpetuating itself. And it was only when I went to a Sure Start centre, like a child centre like this one, that I learnt that sitting down and reading with your child. I mean, there's books here. I didn't have books in my house when I was growing up. And I learnt that telling your child how much you love them is something that's so important. Now, most people think, well, of course you tell your children you love them, but if you're not nurtured in that way, you just assume children know they're loved, you know. And I thought I was the best parent in the world, and I bought all the nappies. I even got organic baby food because I thought that's the best way of making sure that he gets the nourishment he needs. But I didn't realise I was emotionally not nourishing him, and it was only through learning, through the parenting skills that I got, that I changed that cycle. And now my son, I'm a grandma, and my son, when he sees his daughter, he just scoops her up naturally in his arms, and he does all those things in him, and it comes quite naturally to him. But I know those skills were not natural. Those skills were the ones that I placed on him because of the Sure Start Centre intervened. And that to me is what that Labour message is that's the intervention you make and change people's lives and empower people.
Do you think you're quite different now then? Because you're very warm now, I would say, especially when you see the way you meet people and the way you greet people. Have you changed then, do you think, quite significantly?
Yeah, because it was a light bulb moment for me. Because I don't want people to feel the way I felt. I want people to feel special about themselves. So I went round for a long time feeling I wasn't good enough. And to this day, I still have that little chip on my shoulder, I still have that problem. When people give me lots of praise, I find it difficult to accept that praise because I always felt I wasn't good enough. So it's easier to accept the negative comments than it is the positive.
Which in politics has got to be pretty difficult, right? Because there are a lot of negative comments.
Yeah, so it was, for me, I look at the way people are criticised now, and I look at the way people are impacted on the lifestyles that we have today, and I see people that are unhappy, and I want to intervene because I want to say you should be so proud of who you are, so happy with who you are, and government should enable that. And the interventions that happened for me enabled me to see that my mum couldn't love us as children, not because she didn't care about us, but because she wasn't nurtured herself. So to break that cycle is the most important thing we can do, and people are what politics is about. It's not stuffy Westminster. That's why I like to be out in my constituency, because if I can help someone recognise their potential and support them in being the best version of them, then I get so much from that. You can see the energy I get just being in rooms with people, where I feel like if I've made you feel special, then I've done my job, because people intervened in my life when I was younger and gave me that chance. So I just like to spread what other people gave me.
Having had a child at 16 and then being a grandmother at 37, having cared for your own mum, do you feel like you were kind of robbed of a childhood, really, and any youth? I mean, you've not really had any chance in life.
No,
from the age of 0 to 37.
I mean, I've got to say, like, when I first became an MP, it felt so selfish, because for the first time in my life, I was not cooking for anybody else, not washing, not looking after anyone, coming back to my flat at all hours, going to work, doing what I wanted to do, people thinking I'm really important, giving me things, and the world revolved around me as a member of Parliament. It was the most strangest thing I've ever done. And most people were saying that Parliament was like university to them, and I never went to university, so it did feel like my childhood going into Parliament, because I suddenly was this person like at school learning all these things and being independent and being thought of in a different way to being a carer or being a mum. I've always looked after other people, so that kind of felt a little strange doing that for the first time.
Are you sad at all about what you might have missed out on, though? I just think you are incredibly positive, but does it hurt a little bit that you gave up quite a lot, really, when you were young?
But I got so much from it as well, because I survived it, and there's so many people that I see today, and some of the vulnerabilities that I had as a child and the experiences I had, there's a lot of people that are damaged because of their childhood, whereas I've utilised what's happened to me and the experiences I've had, and I've channelled them in a way that I can feel positive about myself and also give other people positivity as well and help them with their lives. So I've channeled it in a really positive way, and I feel like I've dealt with what I was given, and I've done it in a really positive way for me and for other people, and it could have been so much different. And I think when I had Ryan at 16, that really changed my life, because I didn't care about me. I was getting into scrapes. I was going clubbing at the age of 14. I was out there in the big world of Manchester club life in the 90s, just like getting involved in all sorts of stuff that could have been really risky behaviour for me. And then it was only when I got pregnant with Ryan that I suddenly felt I love this child and I want to be the best mum I can be for this child. I didn't care about me. For me, I was not a person that was worthy of love and affection, but my son was everything, and it changed my life. And I think I'm lucky for the situation that I was in, because it gave me a reason to live and to live a good life and be positive about it. And I think if I hadn't have had Ryan at 16, things might have been a lot different for me.
And it is sort of counterintuitive that despite your background and despite everything you say about Westminster being a bit like Hogwarts, you have flown up the scale really quickly in politics. But I do still see people say, cruel things on Twitter, don't they? They say, Angela Rayner can't even speak properly.
Thick as mince. I get that 100 times a day.
Does that hurt?
No, because one of the things that I've sort of thought about in my life is you've got to think about the people that matter. Because people will always criticise you, whether you're in the public eye, whether you're not. There'll always be someone, for whatever reason, who'll criticise you, and life can be really difficult. So for me, it's about, you've got to go for people that make you feel better about yourself. So supply yourself with like-minded people around you. Don't supply yourself with negativity around you. And think of the people who are important. So my children are important. If my children said that I was bad, that would hurt. That would hurt my heart. If people who I loved said that about me, that would hurt. And people who know me as Angela the mum, Angela the daughter, Angela the friend, if they said that about me, that would hurt. But people who don't know me and only see a public persona, then I sort of detach myself from that, because I think that people have got other things going on in their life. They don't really know me, and therefore I don't let it get to me, because otherwise you can dwell on the negatives. And like I said before, it's easier to accept negatives than it is positives. So therefore, the one thing I learned with my mum's bipolar is to try and put systems in place to help yourself so that you don't get into that dark place, because being in that dark place is really hard for anyone and really difficult to pull yourself out of. So I like to keep myself mentally well, and I've learned that. That's one of the other things that I think was really positive about, because I remember my mum being suicidal when I was age 10, and I'm sleeping at the edge of a bed because I was worried that if I fell asleep she'd do something to herself and harm herself. And as a child that stuck with me, and I never want anyone to feel that there's no way out for them. So for me, I've always seen it as important to look after your mental well-being and reach out for help. And that's kind of why I overshare, because I like to make people feel comfortable and to
talk
say,
about their emotions,
you're okay,
and
be open about it. That's the most important thing you can do. Nobody's perfect, you know. If you strive for perfection, you're not gonna win. So
have you had dark times then yourself? Have you been to some of those dark places and felt like you can't cope?
I think everybody has those moments, you know, where they feel like this is overwhelming, I don't know what I'm doing. Certainly when I was a mum at 16, I was so desperate to prove to everyone that I was a good mum. I was, cleaning the house at 4 o'clock in the morning just to make it pristine. And, you know, I was walking for 4 or 5 miles a day to get to the charity shop to get the best clothes for my son, because I didn't have money at the time as well. So I had behaviours where I was overcompensating for what I felt was I wasn't good enough, and I wanted to prove to people that I could be better. And so I've had those moments, but sharing that experience and realising that you will never be perfect, and you will have times in your life where it can be overwhelming and you can feel upset, reach out. And I was a Samaritan as well. I was one of the youngest Samaritans in the Northwest, and I remember feeling incredibly privileged to help people and just be a listening ear for people when they need it. And also the difference in people that need that help. Everyone thinks you have to be weak or imperfect or have mental health problems in order to feel the need for reaching out for some help, but loads of people who are in incredibly professional jobs and on the outside look incredibly successful actually need to reach out at times. It's a human nature. It's what we do, it's what we are, and I think the difference between people who achieve and people who don't recognise that at times in their life they need people to help them.
And they're self-aware and they understand themselves.
Exactly.
And you know, we've seen obviously with the death of Caroline Flack that it can affect people in very high-profile positions.
It really can. People who on the outside look like they've got everything can be incredibly sad and feel incredibly overwhelmed in their life. And I think recognising that and reaching out and getting the support is important. That's why community centres like this are important, because it gives people opportunities to meet each other.
Okay, look, we've slightly veered off the format of the podcast here because it's
sorry.
don't be sorry at all, because it's just really interesting talking to you about your background and I don't want to kind of cut that short. But there's a few questions we always ask people at the start of the podcast to get you settled into number 10. Because remember, we're supposed to be
I'm in number 10
thinking about you being Prime Minister. So just very briefly, what's the picture you'd hang on the wall? Is there a photo you love or a picture you love that you'd put on the wall?
Okay, well, obviously I'd have my kids on the wall because I miss them when I'm away. But I've got a picture that I bought when I was a teenager. It's a print from Alexander Miller and it's an industrial scene and I love it, and that would definitely be on the wall. And there's another one that I have in my office, which is of Emily Pankhurst being arrested, and around her is a sea of men and she's just the only woman and she's been arrested, and that inspires me as well.
And what's the drink you pour yourself as you're settling into the Downing Street study?
Oh, it's got to be a vodka and Diet Coke.
Okay, yeah, nice. And lastly, who would you phone first, do you think? Who would you be desperate to call? You can call anyone in the world.
Anyone in the world, I'd probably call my mum.
Yeah.
I'd probably call my mum and say, look, Mum, I did it!
All right, brilliant. Well, look, we've held you up really badly, so we need to get in the car to the next location. Let's have another chat in the car. Right, we're in the car now on the way to the next location, and let's have a bit of a chat about politics now. Is there anything from the last Labour manifesto that you would drop, that you would change?
I think the last Labour manifesto, there was just too much in it and it was overwhelming and people felt it wasn't credible. And actually it wasn't a manifesto for one-term government, it was a manifesto that would have seen us through the whole decade.
So is there something you take out of it then? Can you identify a policy that you think shouldn't have been in there?
I think there were things that ended up being added in, like the free Wi-Fi and the WASPy stuff that wasn't in the policy, wasn't in the document, so therefore people didn't quite see where it was matching.
Do you think that was a mistake then to add the free broadband for everyone into that manifesto?
I think adding things on after already having a big huge menu I think was a mistake. I think it was too much we didn't have an overarching message. If you look at what the Conservatives have done, they just had get Brexit done. I mean, what else does anyone know they were going to do other than get Brexit done? And it resonated, you know, whereas we had so much on our manifesto platform that people just didn't. I mean, most people were saying you need a PhD just to get through an interview because there was so much in the manifesto. So I think actually too much is not as good as actually focusing in on some key important issues that matter to the public.
Politically, what would you say is the difference between you and Jeremy Corbyn?
I'd say that I'm more bombastic, more focused and more sharp, and I think would expect more discipline in a way that Jeremy didn't. He didn't command respect, and he therefore wasn't able to command that collectivism in the Labour Party and bring people together. I think that's the one thing that I've got, is I've had the respect and the support of all of the Parliamentary Labour Party and up and down the country. Most of the constituency Labour Party members have supported me in this process, and I think that's because they know I resonate and speak to ordinary public. I speak like them, I speak my mind, I don't speak in sound bites. You'll always know where I stand with something, and I think people appreciate that. They might not agree with what I say, but people appreciate that. So things like security, people want to know that we're going to keep their streets and their country safe. I know that's important. Credibility on finances, they want to know that we're not going to bankrupt the country. I think that's important, and they want to know that we're going to work together for the interests of the ordinary working people of this country, not, you know, fighting each other or factional. And, you know, I've always done that as well, so I think I resonate with people in the country in a way that Jeremy doesn't.
In terms of your politics, though, would you say there's any difference between you and Jeremy Corbyn?
I think I'm stronger on security. I think, you know, I've always felt quite strong about that.
Do you think he was weak on security?
I don't think he was weak, but I think he had a more international view of things, whereas I see it, I'm more pragmatic in my views. I understand the international context, but I also understand most people in this country just want to know that you're going to keep our country safe and that you're going to look after them, and that's my primary aim, and that's where I come from. A lot of people, I felt, didn't think that that's what Jeremy's primary aim was, and my international policy is about how we can work with countries to get the best for Britain, and I think that's the main difference, is people perceive Jeremy different on that, whereas I'm quite strong on that. Again, law and order and policing, I'm quite strong on things like that, because growing up on a council estate, I know how petty crime and how not having bobbies on the beat and not feeling secure in your own home and in your own area is quite important to most people. If you're working hard, you don't want to be robbed at the end of the week and somebody say, here's a crime reference number, but sorry, there's not enough police to investigate the crime. If you've worked hard all week and somebody comes into your house, violates your property and robs you, you want to know that there's going to be a response to that, and I'm pretty strong on things like that.
So on those issues of law and order and security, where do you think Jeremy Corbyn got it wrong? I'm just trying to think what is a concrete example of what you would do differently.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much he got it wrong, I just think he didn't speak in the language of everyday socialism to me. He didn't talk about that. He talked about fairness and he talked about everybody doing well, which is exactly what I'm saying as well, but it wasn't in the language that ordinary working people would say down the boozer. So I think, you know, people saw it as, you know, he's more interested in what's happening in Venezuela or what's happening in Cuba, and I think some of that was about the way in which he was perceived and how it was typecast, and he wasn't able to get out of that, whereas I'm more bombastic and I bring things down to that practical element of how's that going to affect people in my constituency and how would they feel about that, and I think I connect in that way more than what Jeremy was able to. But I don't think that Jeremy's view on life was that dissimilar to mine. I just think the way in which he put the context to it, often people felt that he wants open borders. No, he wanted a fair immigration system. That was our manifesto, you know. He wants to get away, he doesn't want Trident. Well, Trident was in our manifesto under Jeremy Corbyn, but there was this view that Jeremy didn't care about the things that matter to ordinary people in this country, that I think that I connect with people in a way that Jeremy was unable to.
Given that he did get things wrong, do you think it was a mistake for people to give him 10 out of 10 as a leader?
Well, I don't think he necessarily got things wrong. I think if you look where Jeremy took the party, I mean, before Jeremy was leader of the Labour Party, we were still austerity light. You know, we still had this situation where people felt that the ordinary working people of this country had to pay the price of what the bankers did to our country. And what Jeremy did is took our party into a place where it was that actually it's about fairness, it's about what our values are. If you're going to work, you should be able to live. you don't work to live, you don't live to work, you work to live.
But he lost you seats, though. He lost you seats.
And we gave
you the worst election result since 1935.
We've got to accept that we lost that general election and catastrophically lost that general election.
But do you think there is an acceptance of that, though, in this leadership contest? Because nobody seems to want to criticise Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I think there was a number of issues, and like I say, Jeremy came up on the doorstep. He did come up on the doorstep, and he didn't, for whatever reasons, there were some people that were never going to like the cut of his jib. They were never going to accept him, and we have to accept that. And Jeremy will not be the leader of the Labour Party going forward. Brexit. Our Brexit position was awful. People did not accept where we were on that, and therefore that, was a big deciding factor, I think, at this general election, which it won't be the next time around. And our manifesto was just too much. People were like, it's not credible. And if we listen and we understand those things and start putting that everyday socialism forward and being out there and earning the respect of our voters again, I think we will easily walk the next general election, because Boris Johnson is not the answer to the question. If that's the answer to the question, you've asked the wrong question. And I think most of the general public understand that, but they are so angry with Labour because they felt we weren't listening to them. And I think we've got to accept that and prove to them that we are now listening.
So do you think it is possible for Labour to win an election on the basis of the last manifesto? Because the last time Labour won was under Tony Blair, and that was a very, very different type of politics.
Well, the next manifesto will not be the same as the one we've got now. Brexit will be done. We've got to look at how that brings jobs and investment into the red wall area, that everyone can prosper out of what happens next, and that people can see that's what we expect. Our economy has to work for everyone. We can't have a rigged system like we've got at the moment. So I think the first thing we have to do immediately, and if I was deputy leader, is to prove to the voters that we're going to be an effective opposition. We're not going to be fighting each other, and we're going to be taking the government to task on things where they're not doing things right, and that we're going to put the public and the future of our country first and not fight each other. I think once you do that and then have a programme that talks about what people feel is important to them, and we streamline that for the next manifesto, and we can prove to people that we're a government in waiting, then I think we can win the next general election.
Jeremy Corbyn says that he would take a job. Do you think he has a place in the next shadow cabinet?
I think if you look at what Jeremy achieved, he got people like me who would never have had the opportunity to serve on the front bench, and he gave us that opportunity. I think now the opportunity should be for the next generation to come forward. I think obviously people who have served and people who have been in the party a long time like Jeremy can support and mentor people coming forward, but I do think we have to show that we're different and that we're bringing new talent in, and we have to show that we want to do that and change as a party, that people have confidence that we can speak to the whole of the country, and I think that that's the best way of taking us forward.
Do you think the party is changing? Because it kind of feels like during this leadership election there is a bit of a shift, that maybe that cult of personality, as some people would call it, around Jeremy Corbyn has sort of gone away a bit, and people are reflecting and they're thinking, right, from a sensible point of view, what's the best way forward? Do you feel a change in the party?
I think it's interesting because you look at populism and you see what's happening there. Like Donald Trump's, you can argue, is a personality. Boris Johnson is a personality. Jacob Rees-Mogg is a personality.
Sure.
Jess Phillips is. I am. people who are considered quite different and loud,
charismatic,
human.
Yeah, human.
People like that. They like that difference, and I think we have to show more of that. Gone are the days of the machine politician that comes out in a shiny suit that's got all these buzzwords. People are not interested in fancy words anymore. They want to see what you're going to do, say what you mean, and mean what you say. And I think if you're able to do that and be yourself, then people will warm to that. And I think people are crying out for that type of politician. And it doesn't always have to come from the right. At the moment, the right have tweak to that. They know that at Cotton Don that's what people want, and we failed to respond to that in the same way. What we need to do is celebrate our differences. We don't have to be just one whole group of greyness. We can all be different and have different personalities, come from different backgrounds, and celebrate that difference and come together, because that's what our country is. We're all different and we all have different backgrounds and perspectives, but when we come together as a country, we can do great things.
I suppose I'm just interested to know whether you think it went a bit too far, the cult of personality with Jeremy Corbyn, whether it almost made people within Labour a bit blinkered to what was really going on in the country, because they just were so obsessed with not criticising Jeremy Corbyn.
No, I think, you know what it was, is that people in the Labour Party was fed up with what I call vanilla politics. They wanted to see something different. They wanted to feel good about their values. You know, they didn't want to have to feel like they have to compromise their values. And I don't think we have to go back to any day of compromising. And actually, Tony Blair's government was at its best at the beginning in 1997. That manifesto and that feeling of hope and aspiration that we had, that things were going to change for the better, is something that I think that people tapped into with Jeremy Corbyn. So actually, Tony Blair and Jeremy Corbyn were both answers to the question at the time.
Except Tony Blair was a centrist compromise compared to Jeremy Corbyn.
But if you look back, actually, when Tony Blair came in, he was radical. He was talking about a minimum wage, and businesses were saying we'll all be bankrupt, all the businesses can't cope, you know.
That's true.
The stuff that Tony Blair was saying at the time, introducing the Sure Start centres, you know, rebuilding our education system, these were radical proposals. The mass investment, the public sector investment that Tony Blair did was phenomenal. If we tried to do it today, they'd say, oh, you're bankrupting the country, you know, the money that was ploughed into our public services, and the stuff around troubled families and children's, you know, we had Every Child Matters, this whole new structure of how we look after the most vulnerable. So I think that the first few years of the Tony Blair government transformed our country for the better, and people feel so inspired by that. And Jeremy's message of we don't have to manage decline, you don't have to accept austerity, and that you can build our country again. Actually, I think people wanted that authenticity and that raw sort of genuineness that Jeremy brought. So I don't think it was cool. I think it was more about how people felt about themselves and about, I don't want to compromise on my values anymore. I want to feel good about my politics. I want to feel good about my neighbourhood. I want to invest in the people that I work alongside rather than taking what I can. They'd had decades of this individualism, take, and people wanted to feel a sense of community again. And I think that's what the Corbynism was about, especially in the Labour Party, was feeling a sense of community and a sense of, you know, what we stand for and our core values.
Just lastly, because we need to go to your next location, if you do get the deputy leadership, would you like to keep the education portfolio? Because Tom Watson sort of had the culture, media and sport portfolio. Do you think you could do both? Because you do care a lot about education.
I care massively about education, and that's why I think it would probably be the job that I think I need to do around my organising skills, about building the party and taking it around the country, actually, especially if you look at what Scotland next year, we've got the Holyrood elections, that's important, the Welsh Assembly elections, our local elections. I want to be out there doing that work. I think I can't do the education brief part-time, so I would hand over the reins to somebody else on that, but I would like to see a comprehensive national education service. I think I've put it in a good place. I've challenged the government. I don't think Ofsted would have restructured its framework if it wasn't for the things we were saying. We wouldn't have got compulsory sex and relationship education on the statute books if it wasn't for the work that I did, and preventing more segregation in our schools, which is what I was able to do. I'm really proud I've changed the landscape in education, and the Tories wouldn't have put the money that they have, even though it's still not enough. The money that's gone back in is because of the fight that I've led with parents and with teachers and with support staff over the last couple of years, and whoever takes over next, I think will have a fantastic platform to then, you know, build on that success really, and then take us hopefully into government. And I'd like to see that national education service. Okay, all right, well look, we're just arriving at the next location now. Let's get a bit of lunch, I think, hopefully. Ooh, lovely, yeah, thanks. That would be amazing. And we do the best lunch in Ashton-under-Lyne. What is lunch in Ashton-under-Lyne? I mean, it can be anything from a samosa to a wrap to, you know, chicken and chips. Nice. We love a bit of chicken and chips around there. I love a bit of chicken and chips. I mean, we even have we have vegan stuff as well in Manchester. Who knew that in Manchester you can get vegan dinners as well. So we didn't get any lunch in the end at the Hindu temple, which is my fault. No. Because I made us late. To be honest, it's not unusual for me on a Friday to not get any lunch. I usually squirrel away my Haribo sweets because we try and fit so much in, because when you become an MP you're often taken away from your constituency, and people are like, we never see you, and you try and
put so much in to my day on a Friday that we generally tend to work through our lunch anyway. So sorry that you didn't get a lunch. But
so I'll get some lunch later, probably a sandwich at the train station, knowing the way the
well, we've got some fantastic places here that you can go and visit. Lots of my local cafes, independent ones, are really fantastic. So make sure you visit.
All right, I'll take your recommendations before we go. Just finishing off our chat that we were having in the car earlier, once this leadership contest is out of the way, do you think the party can heal and those factions can be brought back together? Because it's been such a divisive time in the last few years, hasn't it?
I think the party's already started that healing process. If you look at the nominations and you look at the way that we've conducted the competition so far and the talent that we've got, the party's absolutely eager to learn the lessons of the defeat of the general election. We don't want to make that mistake again, and we want to prove to the general public that we want to serve them as a government. We're not a protest party, we're not a continual opposition. We've been in opposition now for a very long time, and we want the opportunity to serve so that the things like my National Education Service can actually be born into fruition, and we can, make people's lives more improved, and help people get on in life, which is what the Labour Party was formed for.
I have heard some MPs say if Rebecca LAN Bailey wins that they'll leave the party. And what do you say to that?
I don't think anyone would leave the party at the moment, actually. I think people have noticed that we've got talent, and we have. We've got 3 fantastic candidates that are still in the race for the leadership. We've got the deputy leadership. There's 5 of us that are standing, and I think that my organising skills, my ability to bring the community together, to speak to ordinary voters, to really tell people how I see it, and then put things into practice to change people's lives. And what we did when I needed a Labour government, I think I can bring that back into the Labour Party and take us forward, and that's why I'm standing as deputy.
And if MPs do say, right, that's it, I'm leaving, I've had enough, what do you do? I mean, what do you say to them? Fine, good riddance, or?
Well, I honestly don't think that would be the case, but some MPs did do that before, and where are they now? So if people want to do that, that's up to them, but I think it's an absolute privilege to serve your community. If people go to the voting booth and put a cross next to your name and say, I want you to represent me and my family and our hopes and dreams for the future, the last thing you do is walk off the pitch. You get in there and you fight for your community, and that's all I've ever done, and I've never taken for granted the privilege that I've had representing people here in Ashton-under-Lyne, and I think it's the most important thing is to remember you're there to represent the people who elected you, not yourself or your own interest.
Okay, well look, we haven't talked enough about you being Prime Minister on this podcast. But too much to talk about in terms of deputy leadership. But let's have a few quick fire questions at the end, just for fun, just to talk about you being Prime Minister again. So this is you, Angela Rayner, Prime Minister.
In number 10.
Who would you rather have a meeting with first, President Trump or President Putin?
Oh, neither. I want a woman. I want, I want.
Who would be your first?
Probably, is it the Finland or something, somewhere like that?
Well, they've got, I think,
the new young Prime Ministers.
They've got a female Prime Minister, and I think all the top roles as well.
I would be much more happier chatting to them.
Okay. Best BBC funding model, licence fee or subscription service?
Licence fee. I think subscription service would mean that some of the really important public duty broadcasting that we get would be, squeezed out, and I think that's really vital for our communities, is that everyone's represented, and the BBC is there to do that. And if it went to subscription, it would be about what's more popular, and we just end up with like these, television programmes, which is like, Love Island type programmes, and actually I think what's more important is these documentaries that show you what the real life is like for people who have challenges, and I think it's a really important part of what the BBC does.
I mean, do you agree with some of your colleagues who've said the BBC is biased against Labour?
No, I don't think that. I don't think the BBC is biased. I think that all of the media give us a hard time, and they've always given Labour a hard time, I think. And I think it's important that people recognise that the BBC has a public duty, and I think they carry that out. I mean, to be fair, everyone hates them at the moment, it seems. Everybody's been all hated on the BBC at the moment, but I think without it, you've got Murdoch, and that type of press is the one that I'm more concerned about. Those that go phone hacking and do despicable things. We need Leveson too. We need to push that forward. And we need to protect our public service broadcasters because they do a very, very important job. That doesn't mean to say we can't criticise them when we think they're wrong, but I think it's important to defend the right to have that public service broadcasting.
Okay. Do you have any Conservative friends?
I do, yeah, I do.
Who's your best Conservative friend?
I don't know about who my best Conservative friend is. I wouldn't use the term best Conservative.
Okay, out of the Conservatives.
Right, so the one who I sort of got on with the most who was really quirky was Nicholas Soms, and that was because his granddad was the MP Winston Churchill, who was the MP for Oldham.
I see. Okay, so you had that.
So we had that natural connection because obviously me being an MP for Oldham, and I found him a bit quirky, so I quite like that about Nicholas. So yeah, so I got on really quite well with him.
What song would you dance to at party conference as Prime Minister?
I mean, I'd say I'd sing the red flag, but I'm not sure I could dance to the red flag. It's a bit. We all stand there at the end of conference looking a bit awkward, you know, like a very British problem. We all stand there feeling, do you dance whistling. Or yeah, and then Bazza starts whistling, and it's all a bit orcs, isn't it? So, I mean, I'd dance to anything, but my favourite song at the moment is probably that represents me is "A Woman Like Me" by Little Mix.
Okay, all right, good choice. What would your Downing Street pet be? Do you like animals? Or?
Yeah, I've got pets. So my son's registered blind, and we've got a buddy dog, a guide dog called Luna, and she's a golden retriever, and I absolutely adore taking her out. And I've got two cats called Woozle and Tilly. I mean, she was called Little 'Un, and then she was the big cat, so we had to rename her. So she ended up, I mean, I don't know why, but we all just started going woo woo, so she ended up being Woozle, because I don't know what it is, but you all talk like a really weird baby language to your cats, don't you? And they're probably looking at us thinking, why are you speaking to me like that?
Clever for that. Yeah. So they're all coming into Downing Street.
They're all coming into Downing Street. Excellent. I used to have an aquarium as well. I used to have fish and stuff, but you can't do that as a member of Parliament because you have to be like a chemical biological engineer.
It's like the PhD of the water.
Yeah, you've got to keep their water. Yeah. So they're quite tricky to keep.
Yeah,
so
they
it's
die at the drop of the hat.
They really will, and they're quite pricey as well. So you don't really want to be. And clownfish. They're so aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, everyone watched, Nemo, and they thought he was all they're cute and cuddly clownfish. If you get them, be careful.
They've got a killer instinct.
They are nasty.
And lastly, I just ask everyone on the podcast, would you ever want to be Prime Minister?
Who knows? I think it would be lovely actually for people from my background to see that the sky's the limit and that we can actually be prime ministerial. So I think that's the most important thing, is never say never, because the only reason I'd want to be it is to change the country for the better, and if I think I could do that, then yeah, definitely.
Okay. All right, Angela Rayner, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks for having us in your constituency. I've enjoyed my tour. Shame about the weather.
Shame about the food, eh?
Yeah, shame about the lunch. That's my
fault.